Welcome to episode 11 of the Maddie's Joy, an Angelman Journey podcast. I'm your host, Adam Birchmeyer, and on today's episode, I am so happy to bring an interview that I did with Micah Huegel, who's with Mary Freebed in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He is a neurodevelopmental technique certified pediatric physical therapist. He's also Maddie's physical therapist. We talked about some physical therapy questions, but later on in the episode, Micah actually kind of reverts back to his experience in the healthcare system and his thoughts on kind of being that squeaky wheel to get your child the services that they need. So make sure that you listen to the episode all the way through because I think it just gets stronger as it goes. Um, there's a couple audio hiccups in the beginning, but they do smooth out fairly quickly. So thanks for just being patient with that. And I hope that you enjoy episode 11. And thank you so much for listening. We are welcoming Micah Huegel to the podcast. Micah is actually Maddie's physical therapist over at Mary Freebed. And just a real quick story. The reason why we picked Micah was actually because Maddie would cry from the first moment of the session until the last moment of the session with everybody else. And Micah was the first person that Maddie only cried about 50% of the time. So that's why we chose Micah, and we've stuck with him ever since. Probably about 2 years ago now. It's been so.
Yeah, pretty much.
Thank you for joining the podcast, Micah. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Oh, not too bad. We were just talking offline about how both of our daughters just went down to sleep. Um,
To
but we'll
sleep,
just,
in
yeah, to
quotes,
sleep.
right?
But let's just get right into this. So first question, let's just check your credentials here. Do you have any special credentials for working with children or neurodivergent individuals?
So specifically, no. I mean, I'm a pediatric physical therapist. So basically, you get your clinical doctorate in physical therapy, and then they say, good luck in the workforce. I did do a residency at Mary Freebed. It's not necessary, but is an option. There's several credentialed programs around the country. At the time, Mary Freebed was not one, but is now. So, and then specifically for like that neural individuals with like neurological diagnoses or things like that, I did get certified in neurodevelopmental technique, which is mostly like a handling and also kind of a general framework to help kind of organize your thoughts and organize your treatment sessions.
Gotcha. So when parents are actually looking for a physical therapist, what should they be looking for to kind of find the right fit for their child?
I mean, the big thing is, well, first off, it all depends on the resources you have available, right? So if you have a place that is like pediatric specific, I mean, that's definitely the place to start. I mean, there's several places in Michigan alone where it's kind of like we meet someone through the clinic that I'm a part of, and they drove a long way to get there, and then they're like, well, we just have a PT in town that's willing to treat a kid, and you're like, okay, well, it's better than nothing, right? So um since COVID, there has been a little more opportunity for telehealth to get covered by insurance. I feel like it takes a special kind of situation for that to work, but I do have like a patient that I work with in the UP that I've only seen in person, a handful of times. So, um, and then in terms of what those clinics have available, I mean, obviously, like it needs to be therapy masked as play. So like that kid needs to think that they're playing the whole time. And the moment they realize they're not playing, they'll probably let you know. So
So how do you kind of do that with the virtual visits? Because obviously you're not physically there. So how can you kind of mimic that play?
so that's tough. So I mean, luckily it has to be like, as I said, like an ideal situation where family's willing to get down there and kind of take my advice in terms of handling and stuff like that. For the situation that I have right now, it's a matter of looking at, I see this kid crawling towards this thing in their toy room, and I'm like, okay, we're going to use that. And because it's like the moment you try and set one thing up and then they want to go do something else, you're like, and then they keep bringing them back and you're like, oh, that it's probably not going to work. Like you need to, it's exactly how you would, I guess, in a treatment session in person, where like you need to figure out what they're interested in and then go from there. So virtually, it just adds that whole other element of I can't actually like grab the kid and bring them in front of me.
And then because we've been through, I think, three occupational therapists now, and we found an occupational therapist that we really like. But as I think professionally, I would kind of get offended if somebody moved on from me, but obviously I'm not in the field that you're in. So let's just ask that question. Do you get offended when parents are like, I don't think it's a good fit for you?
No, I mean, I guess to answer the question, right? Um, Especially being a guy in pediatrics, for every like one or two kids that like don't want to work with a male or they like might be scared, my dishwasher's going, so I apologize if that's up. um so um for any kid that, I had one instance where literally the initial treatment session was, I'm just trying to work with this kid, doing this, that, and the other thing. And this kid would not do anything for me, wouldn't do a thing. And then I actually had a coworker who had like a cancellation. And I was like, hey, can you go in there and just try and make them like walk on this balance beam? And right away, like they did. And I go, I mean, we could keep these sessions, but we could also, like, I'm not going to solve the beard fear. It was like specifically beards, not only men, it was like bearded men because it was around Christmas. And I'm like, how was Christmas? And like, terrified of Santa. And then they're like terrified of the guy's brother-in-law or something. And I was like, does brother-in-law have a beard? And it was like, he does. And this was pre-mask. So it was like, then this isn't gonna work. So like that was one where obviously you don't take it seriously there. I mean, there have been instances where I remember someone, yeah, I just like found out because I called them and they're like, oh yeah, we decided to like go to a different place, not even like internally, but like go somewhere else. And I was a younger professional at that time. And I feel like I did kind of take it a little bit, but I mean, for every, I mean, at the end of the day, if the kid doesn't work well with you, then like my goal is for that kid to get better. So I don't care if that's with me or whoever it's with.
And that's kind of why we went with you, is because Maddie actually responded well. Um, we didn't view it as we were offending anybody, but like I
Yeah,
said,
no,
professionally, I might feel that way if somebody decided to buy the same product from somebody else. If I was in sales,
yeah.
or because I'm in sales. Um, so obviously Maddie sees you one or two times a week. But how can a special needs parent help support the work that you're doing in the clinic at home?
So big thing is, and I'm not the best at this, so I'll be straight up, is like providing some home exercises. I feel like most of the time in terms of like the home exercise that I want to implement is that parent engaged in the treatment session. So if that parent's asking questions or just like commenting on what I'm doing, or even saying like, I know in our instance, sometimes it's like, oh, I see you're kind of like struggling with that. Well, she does that at home. And you're like, well, that's good. I always tell parents, I'd rather have the kid do more at home than at therapy, because otherwise that would be very aggravating. If you're like, kid won't do this, and then at home, or like kid won't do it at home and at therapy, they're like walking. Like I can only imagine how frustrating that would be. So biggest carryover would be having parents who are engaged in the session and kind of observing what I'm doing and then trying to implement that at home. So one benefit of early on, or I mean, early intervention, which is in Michigan called early on, the big benefit of that is that's on home turf. So like they can see what your house looks like. They say, set this up this way. Whereas we have stuff at our place and then it's kind of like, hey, what do you have that you could mimic this activity? So the biggest thing is like, is that parent engaged? If the parent's engaged, then they will try and do what I'm doing, which is what I want.
Yeah, not over. I mean, just speaking as a a caregiver for my child, sometimes I get burnt out just trying to do these just trying to do the repetitions, and it's not going anywhere, and I get frustrated. But I also notice that sometimes during therapy, Maddie kind of gets burnt out after 6 7 weeks of therapy or however long. So we usually take a break from therapy. Is Are therapy breaks a myth, or is that a real thing? Is therapy burnout a real concern for children?
I feel like it depends on who you ask. I think Mary Free Bed as a whole, like as a department, as our pediatrics department, we believe in episodic care. I know like trying to field this question, I was kind of reviewing some articles and like the research shows there's benefits in breaks. There's benefits in doing intensives where you're doing, 2 to 3 times a week for 6 weeks. And then you hit it and then you're good. Um, I always use the analogy, especially for families that either came from somewhere that they always did therapy or just someone who's new to the process and they're like, what is episodic care or that kind of taking a break? Um, I always say, first off, it's like an oil change where like you come in, you tune up, you're out, you move on. But then I would also always use the analogy of when I was studying in PT school, I would always study at the library because I couldn't study in my room because I'm too comfortable there. After a while, you spend so much time at the library that then I start checking my Facebook because I get too comfortable. So once that kid gets too comfortable, then your benefits are not going to be as rich because then they're going to kind of try and run the show a little bit more. But also the other side is, yeah, like kids get tired of doing. I mean, we all get tired of doing work, right? I mean, if I could take a break every 6 12 weeks, I would. But just looking at, I think it's just better for everybody. Because if you've got someone I've got patients who are tough. So after 12 weeks, and if we're wrestling like every single week, parents are tired because, I mean, they're watching their kid like not have fun. The kid isn't thrilled, obviously. And then the therapist is like trying to do their best to get something done. But it's like, I've also said that to people, like, now's just not a good time. Like, there are certain ages where, yeah, like it would be great if we could work on certain things. But if all we're doing is butting heads, then it's like, let's just try again in a few months and go from there. Because also too, it's like if we can accomplish one thing, so like in Maddie's case, like ideal situation, it's like we keep seeing her for a little bit. Ideally you wait for like that big milestone. So like if we're trying to stand independently or something, it's like you want to try and like get something and then you say go home and like play with that, explore with those new skills. And then when you start to think that next chapter, so I'm thinking about like a kid who, let's say we got him walking, said, all right, go play. And then he starts preschool and he's like, oh man, like stairs are really hard. Well, he wouldn't say it, but someone would. And then it's like, okay, well, let's start up and do that again. It also ties in really well with school. So if you've got a kid who goes to school and has summers off, we are busier in the summer because that's when everyone tries to kind of do a round of therapy because obviously their schedules are way more open. So there's several different facets to why it's a benefit.
And I noticed when you were answering that question, you said that you actually approached the parents. Do you feel like as the therapist and as the professional, it's your job to kind of help guide that conversation, or should parents, if they identify something, kind of step in and take the lead there?
I mean, I prefer if parents want to speak up. I always say, whenever I have like an evaluation or something, I always say, I'm part of your team, right? So like, if you don't think this is worth it, then you just let me know. Like, I guess that's part of like, that's not kind of tying back to like, is it going to hurt my feelings? It's like, no, because if this isn't working right now, then it's not working. So, because sometimes in my mind, I'm thinking it and then I'm like, do I bring it up? Do I not bring it up? Because then also it can be like, does the kid work better without the parents there? But then that kind of takes away that home exercise piece. If I'm doing a session and they're not there, even if we have the best session ever, then it's really hard to carry that over because you're not even seeing. We have a couple rooms that have like some windows, but it's just not the same as like seeing it.
And going back to kind of, Maddie's cognitively delayed, is there a difference when you're working with, say, a neurotypical child compared to a child who has cognitive delays, or is kind of the process the same for you?
I mean, I would say it's different. I mean, I guess same general scheme in which like we do our evaluation, you write your goals, and you work towards achieving those goals. Um, Special considerations for individuals who have cognitive delay or things like that is thinking about intervention strategies that would be still appropriate to them. So, if I've got someone who is 10 years old, but cognitively is more like 4 years old, then I'm not going to play Uno to like as a reward system. I'm going to, still play with certain toys that seem appropriate. So, in the sense that those, the intervention stays the same, it's just the delivery would be different.
And the thing that I love about your guys' clinic is we saw you guys when Maddie was probably about 7 months old. So we started therapy right at about 8 months old. How important is early intervention when a child's not hitting their milestones?
So, loaded question because I mean, this is kind of a big soapbox for me and for Dr. Voss, who runs the clinic. I think early intervention is the most important thing. I mean, the old general rule of thumb was we'll wait till they're two. I don't know who said two, but then everyone was just like, nice, two it is. And you think about all of the neuroplasticity and neural development, all this stuff that happens. I mean, the one picture that comes to mind is like, I remember in some article where there's like, they show the neurons of like a young child, and those neurons are just like everywhere. And there's like, they kind of do like they they take this bundled mess, and then as they get older it turns into more organized stuff. So clearly there's a lot happening. So why would we wait, let a kid learn how to do things their way, then start therapy and say, hey, I know you figured out a way, but you're doing it wrong. I'm going to teach you how to do it right. And also these kids have never had any handling done to them. So like, you think about a 2-year-old, like they are doing whatever they want to do. And if you get a kid that's just even used to therapy at that age, you're already so far ahead. So, I mean, early intervention for any diagnosis is of utmost importance. And in Maddie's case, it was kind of this hiccup almost where like we thought post COVID and then it ended up being something else, but I mean, it just like turned into this other thing. And I mean, because kids don't get diagnosed with Angelman syndrome early or like this early, typically.
Yeah, she still got her picture in the front page of the USA Today. for that post-COVID delay.
Yeah.
We just didn't know. But before I ask the final question, which is actually Nicole's question,
Oh boy.
is there anything that you kind of want to touch upon that maybe we didn't touch upon earlier in this podcast?
Let's see. Anything I want to touch on that we haven't really talked about? Oh man, such an open-ended question.
I gave you some really limited questions, so I figured I'd just open up the whole
just
world
give me
to
all of it. The I guess, and this goes beyond PT. This is more like early intervention and detection of stuff. It's like, if you think something's wrong, there's a decent chance you're right. So, and the entire network is the healthcare system is not the most user friendly world. So if you've got a pediatrician or a PCP, family practitioner, and you're like, hey, this isn't right, something's going on, and they're like, well, we'll just wait, like, go to a different practitioner. Like, there are, even for conditions like torticollis, which is just like a muscle tightness issue, you get those kids in at 1 month old, and you're done with therapy after 2 months, versus if they come in at like 8-9 months because they thought, oh, it'll just go away, and then it just gets worse or stays the same. That episode of therapy is so much harder, so much more unpleasant for all parties involved, therapist, family, because you think about like doing stretches on a 9-month-old who's crawling, and then like that can affect different gross motor skills. So the big thing is getting, like, listen to your gut. And if your gut's wrong, then okay. But like, you're not out anything. I mean, you're out a couple bills probably from seeing specialists and stuff, but because really it's normally like primary care. If they think something's wrong, luckily in our area, then it's like we get the referral. That's how we end up seeing them. And then they can see PT, OT, physiatry, and see all that. But normally it's like PCP, then they might see neurology, and then they do an MRI, and then the MRI might come back normal. And another thing too is like, because I've had this come up too, is if that MRI comes back normal and you as a parent aren't relieved, then keep digging. Like, because if you know something's wrong, like, don't get me wrong, we all want a normal MRI. But if you are still like, but this doesn't answer the question, then you keep digging. So then it normally goes from neuro, then it goes to genetics, then you get genetic testing done, and then you still might not find out in the initial genetic testing. Then there's a whole nother set of genetic testing. And all of that takes so much stinking time. So like, if you feel like something's wrong, do something or try. I mean, I'm not discrediting parents by any means, but like, if you feel like you need to go see another specialist, like, be the squeaky wheel. And if eventually like it comes up that everything was fine, then you were just a headache for a few months, and that's fine.
Yeah, and when you were talking about that, it took me back to an Angelman parent that I know, Betsy Black, who did a post on our blog. She was talking about her youngest, and they went through all the testing, and everything seemed to be coming back normal. And then the PCP just said, "Well, I think," and I forget which syndrome it is. He just said, "I think it's this syndrome, but we'll just wait to test for it until she has a seizure." And Betsy just kind of looked at him and was like, "Can we do the testing before she
Yeah.
has a seizure?" And it turns out, the doctor was wrong. It ended up being Angelman syndrome. But yeah, just kind of being that bug in people's ear. I think that's what I'm the greatest at. It's not necessarily that I'm super skilled at navigating the system, but I ask questions and I kind of push, I just kind of push forward until we got an answer. And even now we still kind of push. I mean, we were in the middle of an OT session and we're like, okay, PT's next. When are we going to schedule that?
Yeah. Which honestly, as a provider, I don't hate. Like, there are so many families that I know that I'm just like, you know how to, like once you know the system, like if you think you want to do PT, you don't need to wait for a green light from me or anybody else. Like just start the process. Obviously, if you're navigating the system for the first time, you have to go through certain channels, but like there's nothing wrong against like taking notes and kind of learning the ins and outs, because also even in like various state to state, but if you go see neuro somewhere, they could say, all right, we'll write you a script, we'll send you to our RPTs. You have the right to say, no, I want to go here. And but it feels awkward, like if that easily could have been, I mean, Maddie's case, someone could have just sent you somewhere else and you would have been like, okay, like, and we would have never crossed paths. What would we be?
It's funny because they actually did want to send us to a different physiatrist because they said Dr. Voss is the only pediatric physiatrist in the area, so we'll just send her to a normal physiatrist. And we're like, no, that doesn't make any sense. So that's actually, we actually fought to see you guys before we even knew you guys. So so we're so happy that we landed where we are. But let's just move on to Nicole's question, because I think it's a really good question. I added a second question on top of this, so it wasn't Nicole. So our goal is to have Maddie walk by June 3rd, which is her 3rd birthday. That was our goal that we set. Is she going to hit this goal? And if not, why are you so terrible at your job?
Oh, there it is. So which one? So you were the second part?
Yeah, I was the second part.
I don't know. I feel like Nicole could have been that part too.
Yeah, true.
Oh, I mean, okay. Another soapbox, right? Crystal ball questions. I mean, do I want to believe that we can get it done? Yes. But also at the end of the day, like, does the patient want to do it? That's always like another thing. So sure, right? Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I'm going to hold you to that.
And let's see the follow-up. So if she doesn't, what was the exact wording of the second question?
If not, why are you so terrible at your job?
Because I'm optimistic.
Yeah. So one thing that I enjoy is not only does Micah work well with Maddie, but we all seem to get along together, which make the therapy sessions less awkward, and we can just kind of joke around and get through those 45-minute sessions. But thank you so much, Micah, for joining us on the Maddie's Joy and Angelman Journey podcast. We'd love to have you back sometime. So if there's something that you're really passionate about and that you want to just talk about for 20, 30 minutes, we'd be more than happy to have you. And just thank you for everything that you do for our family. We really appreciate it.
No problem. I'm glad to spend some time and be able to just like talk and not also balance doing something with Maddie at the same time.
Not having a screaming child in your ear.
Yeah, it makes things a little bit, I can actually like gather my thoughts a little bit better,